Welcome to the Real Estate Guys radio program. If you look around, you can get a lot of clues reading the news. Today, we're going to delve into the headlines and find out what that means for real estate investors on the Real Estate Guys radio program.
Stop for a moment. Why are you listening to this show? Are you dreaming of a bigger, brighter financial future? More personal freedom to live life on your own terms? What if there was just one skill that could make it happen? There is. Sales. Robert Kiyosaki says every entrepreneur must be good at sales. It's true for investors too. Sales is how you attract money, people, and opportunities. Sales is the skill used to negotiate deals and lead your team. Sales skills are essential to success. The good news is, it's a learnable skill. The great news is, we've created a 2-day interactive workshop to teach those skills to you. Make plans today to attend How to Win Funds and Influence People, Mastering the Art of Financial Selling. For dates and details, send an email to sales@realestateguysradio.com or visit realestateguysradio.com and look under events. Gain the skills you need to succeed. Email sales@realestateguysradio.com or look under the events tab at realestateguysradio.com.
Welcome to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms. With me, as usual, co-host financial strategist Russell Gray.
Hey, Robert.
One of the things Russ likes to do is get up early in the morning and peruse the headlines. There's all kinds of stuff out there, and it's easy to get sidetracked by all the mumbo-jumbo, especially in a political year, right? Who's sleeping with who, all that kind of stuff. Who cares? As real estate investors, we want to dig beneath the headlines and figure out what does the news tell us and what direction do we think perhaps the economy and the markets are going so we can best make our decisions.
Yeah, obviously I concentrate on the financial news because I'm interested in what's going on economically. I'm interested in what's going on with jobs. I'm interested in where the path of progress is, where companies are locating, where the economic vibrancy is. All of those things are very, very important.
Not the Kardashians?
No, not so much. But know what's one thing I've noticed that's really interesting is that when you're reading the finance news, a lot of politics makes its way into the finance news.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, there's a big headline, and one of them we're going to talk about today, where a governing body, a policymaker, a government steps in, does something to a company, or it creates an environment for a company that could have a big impact on jobs. And so I thought today that would be a good thing to talk about, and really just understanding as we're watching the upcoming presidential debates. We know that there's going to be a regime change here in the United States. We know that the United States and what goes on in the United States has impact over the economies all over the world. Obviously, U.S. banking policy and tax policy impacts the entire world. The U.S. is a reserve currency of the world. The banking system, if you get locked out of the banking system because they don't like what you're doing, the U.S. government, as of late, probably the last 10 years or so at least, has, in the war on terror, has been willing to go to the point where they use the U.S. banking system as a weapon of influence. And so rather than maybe being a steward of the currency and the banking system so that people can do international commerce, which is really what it was originally set up to do, now it's become a tool for U.S. policy. So you have to look at that, and there's no way not to look at that as a real estate investor because the environments that are created by government policy have a direct and sometimes profound impact on the companies that employ your tenants.
We talk about markets being manipulated, and some are blatantly manipulated, but some are just influenced. And either way, as a real estate investor, I'm looking to generally make a long-term commitment to a marketplace. We talk about getting married to a market. If I buy a rental home in an area, I'm likely not just to sell that home in a year. Now, the idea of flipping real estate is a whole different story. That's not really investing in real estate. It's a business. It could be a great business where you buy a property, fix it up, sell it at a profit, but you're not married to the market. If I'm a buy and hold investor and I'm investing in commercial buildings or apartment buildings or single family houses, it's important to me to know that there will be tenants interested in my property for some time in the future. And often the policies that happen at the county and city level, at the state level, and at the national level can impact my revenue stream. You don't think about it that way. You just look at a market and the rental market and go, everything's good, but you got to step back up and go, wait a minute, long term, are there likely to be more or less tenants? Are they likely to pay me more or less money?
Well, and it affects income for sure, but it also can affect your property values. Now think about this. We're talking about local, state, or even federal laws having an impact on your Main Street real estate investment, but literally international decisions. So for example, there's a lot of foreign money from China that's been making its way into the United States because the Chinese are seeking a safe haven for their wealth, and so they're parking it in U.S. real estate. China is trying to prevent the flow of capital out of China, and so they're putting in capital controls that restrict that flow of capital from China into the United States and into Canada. So, for example, some of the things that have been in the news is Vancouver. Vancouver property prices have taken a big dip. Some of the high-end real estate, the premier real estate, has been taking a big dip. When you dig into those headlines and you're like, well, why is that happening? These A properties, these quality assets that have been used as a safe haven for this foreign money, as those spigots of foreign money have been shut off, those property values are falling. Now, if you were in there chasing hot money and you were speculating on high-end real estate, or if you're flipping high-end real estate, thinking, hey, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to buy these prime properties, I'm going to rehab them, I'm going to turn around and sell them to foreign buyers, Chinese buyers, and then the Chinese government makes a policy decision about capital controls. Now you're stuck holding a property you can't unload that just dropped 20% in value. So these are things you've got to pay attention to, even if you're a flipper.
Absolutely. And we don't often do that as real estate investors. We've got our heads down. We're scouring neighborhoods, looking for deals. We're talking to our providers, to folks that bring stuff to us. We're like, yeah, it looks good, right? I'm in the fourplex and eightplex space, so that looks like a good deal. Let's do it. We're saying this week, take your head up into the clouds a little bit and look at what's happening. In any election year, we know there's going to be change. You could even say there was change between the two Obama administration years. I mean, yeah, it's the same president, same administration, but during the campaign, things happen, things get said, all of that. This is a particularly interesting campaign. We are not political. We don't care. You vote for whoever who you want to vote for, but understanding what their thinking is and where some of the policy might go based on that is going to help you as a real estate investor.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, too, you have to understand that how you see the world isn't necessarily how the world is for everybody. So I'll give you the multifamily, for example. Everybody who pays any attention to real estate knows that multifamily has been the hot commodity or the hot property class for the last several years.
Lots of money going after multifamily properties, driving cap rates or return down because there's more money chasing the same amount of inventory. We've seen new starts, but they can't keep up with demand. Yeah, multifamily in most markets in the U.S., super hot.
And rents have been rising. And so you think about that, and if you're a multifamily investor, when you think about what's going on in the economy, you're like, oh my God, the economy is amazing.
Right.
But if you really delve into what's gone on in multifamily, what's happened is we had a foreclosure crisis, and so millions of people lost their homes, and they had to become renters. You had a weak recovery, if you could even call it that, a weak jobs market. Even today, it's relatively weak, and the jobs that are being created aren't high-paying jobs.
Well, that's a point. When you say weak, I mean, you can look every time the report comes out and say there's all these jobs. They're just not the right jobs. They're not high-paying jobs. Many times they're not full-time jobs. And so you could definitely look at what that impacts in terms of apartment dwellers. If I have taken a reduction in income, I'm maybe not able to rent a single-family house. Maybe I have to rent a smaller apartment.
Well, that's exactly the case. And so what's happened is you've had a lot of pressure of people coming into the apartment space from the rental demand point of view. And that pressure has created upward pressure on rents at a time where the economic fundamentals aren't really saying that wages are going up and real wages aren't going up. Healthcare costs have gone up. It's harder for people to pay their rent. But that means that they're going out of the more expensive places and they're moving into the more affordable places. So this is the idea that sometimes the indicators aren't sending the signal that you think they're sending. Stock market, for example, that's another great example, right? We have a low interest rate policy in the United States. That has made it very inexpensive for corporations to borrow money dirt cheap and buy back their stock. That puts upward pressure on stock prices. But is that based on real robust earnings? Earnings reports aren't saying that companies are doing well. And yet the stock price says they are. And so if you think the stock market is the measurement of a great economy, you think the economy is doing great. You may look at your portfolio and go, hey, I'm doing great. My stocks are way up. Wow, everything's great. Now you got Robert Schiller coming out saying, hey, everybody, I think there's a bubble. You've got David Stockman coming out. Hey guys, there's a bubble. You've got many pundits coming out going, this stock market thing does not have fundamentals underneath it. There are things going on. What Stockman writes about in his book, The Great Deformation. And these are all outgrowths of Federal Reserve economic policy specific to interest rates. We've been talking about that since forever. So this is the concept. We need to pay attention to really what's going on fundamentally and then ask ourselves, how is that affecting us directly? And how is it affecting the people who make the decisions that affect us indirectly?
When we're owning property for the production of income, we need to pay attention to the vitality and durability of the income. Where is the tenant coming from? Where do they work? Are they likely to keep their job? Are they likely to get an increase in pay? If my tenant isn't getting an increase in pay, I'm not able to raise the rent very easily. In some markets, that's really true. There are markets all over the U.S. where a tenant will move over a $25 a month rent increase. Now, as you're listening to the show, you might think, well, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't move if my landlord raised my rent. I own my house, but if my mortgage went up by $100 a month, I wouldn't move. Yeah, but it's not about you. It's always about who your tenant is. And so stepping back and looking at the big picture for your tenants is critical for real estate investors.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, is your demographics, right? The turnover. You have to look at who you're renting to. And so there will be people who can't make the rental increase because they're not the right tenant. And yet there's so many people who have more money that are moving into an area because they're moving down. People are moving from a place like California or New York or Washington, D.C. or Seattle, Washington, where it's expensive to live. And for whatever reason, they're not making it. You know, they may make a good salary, but the cost of living is so high, it doesn't even matter. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Silicon Valley as an example of that. And even though it's a very prosperous place and people make six-figure incomes, it's so darn expensive, they literally end up leaving. And they can go to some place where they make less money, but that less money goes a lot farther. And that's kind of the point. So you get these shifts. So, you know, as you're looking at your tenant base, you say, where are these people coming from? Not just where do they work, but where are they coming from? And where's the money coming from? Because you can get away with rental increases for a while, but if that flow of people goes away, then all of a sudden you could end up stuck again.
Now, when you hear that we are at an all-time low for percentage of Americans that own their homes, and, you know, obviously we have listeners in lots of different countries, so you know in your area what that looks like, but we're in the U.S. at a low. There are more renters than ever now. That bodes well for landlords, right? We love the fact that there's lots of renters today, but you know what? That's a cycle. That's a pendulum that's going to swing. When we saw the big change in mortgage availability after the crash, it was impossible for a lot of folks who could previously buy houses to buy, not just because they'd already lost a home and their credit was damaged, but because the loan programs weren't available. Today, those loan programs are back, some of them back bigger than ever. And so we're going to probably see again affordability happen on the purchase side. The question is whether people's mindset is there. The folks who are looking at an article that I saw that came out about the way millennials think is they don't think that owning a home is the primary thing. Now, we've heard that for a while, right? That millennials look at their parents and see that, well, they saved up and they bought a home and then they lost their home. I don't want to have that happen to me. I'm very happy to rent. I have a mobile lifestyle. We're noticing that millennials are getting married later. They're thinking about settling down in a particular market later in life, all those things. But this particular article talked about how there's a big divide when we talk about millennials. There are affluent millennials who grew up in middle class and upper class families, very different from the millennials who grew up in the lower class families and where they're doing. They're staying closer to home, and they've always had that necessity to stay with mom and dad a little bit longer, just out of economics. So, you know, as we're looking at demographics, it's critical. When we come back, we're going to look at some specific articles, and our job is going to be to dive into the articles and get below the headlines and really understand what it means for real estate investors. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Live nationwide, you're listening to the Real Estate Guys. Find out more at realestateguysradio.com.
Are you ready to profit in paradise? Hi, it's Robert Helms, and if you think real estate investing means tenants, toilets, and termites, think again. Located just a short plane ride from the U.S., a virtually untouched paradise awaits, the beautiful country of Belize. When you go to Belize with the Real Estate Guys, you'll spend 4 fabulous days discovering one of the most intriguing real estate markets I've ever seen. With its jungle rainforest, pristine beaches, and 81-degree turquoise water, Belize is one of the most beautiful places on earth. Plus, it's considered one of the top 7 tax havens in the world. Belize property is on the rise, and many experts think the best is yet to come. But don't just take my word for it. Come experience Belize firsthand at our upcoming investor field trip. When you join us, you'll discover the many reasons we love Belize, like tremendously undervalued beachfront land, super low taxes, ease of doing business, and so much more. Get the details at realestateguysradio.com. Just click on events. See paradise for yourself. Click events at realestateguysradio.com, and I'll see you in beautiful Belize.
Hi, this is Anthony Melchiori from Hotel Impossible, and you're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program, heard every weekend on this great radio station, all the time at realestateguysradio.com. You can go back into the archives, and there are a bunch of old shows as well. This show is Clues in the News. Every couple of months, we love to do a show where we're looking at what the headlines are saying and really thinking about that, right? You can't just read and take things at face value. You read and you say, wow, would that impact real estate? And what does that mean to me as a tenant? And so you can do a lot of this on your own, and we encourage you to do that. So really today is as much a case study in how we look at the news as the actual news. But there's some really interesting articles.
Yeah, well, one of them that caught my attention, and of course, having spent many, many years in Silicon Valley, I kind of still near and dear to my heart. And I saw one said Silicon Valley slips as a startup hub. I thought, well, that's interesting, because I've always been fascinated by Silicon Valley as an engine of growth. It just has this amazing ability to continually reinvent itself. Way back early in my career in business, I was in Silicon Valley in my early 20s, and my dad was a high-tech entrepreneur at the time, and he was starting a semiconductor company. There was a lot of manufacturing going on. Well, there's no manufacturing going on, virtually none going on in the United States and not anymore in Silicon Valley, but he was building a semiconductor fab. That all happens in Asia today. And so I began to watch how economic conditions change the kind of jobs. So, think about all the fab workers and the kind of blue collar, if you will, from a high tech perspective, people, the renter type people that are no longer having those kind of jobs, printed circuit board assembly. Those are the kind of things going on in Silicon Valley back in the time. So I thought, well, this is interesting. So, if Silicon Valley is slipping as a startup hub, has that magic of being able to reinvent itself gone away? When I delved into the article, it didn't really give me many answers. It opened up a different path. There's 2 lessons, 2 things that I wanted to share out of that I thought were interesting. The first one was I thought back to my early career, and I was an office product salesman. I got my very first job, and I was given the opportunity to pick my territory. So the guy came in, he goes, okay, we've got 2 territories available. You can have this central location here in Cupertino where there's 4-phase computer and timeshare and these big companies that are, I'm sure if you're listening to this, you have no idea who these companies are because they were in the mainframe computer business. Completely
not real estate timeshare, sharing time on a giant mainframe computer.
Yeah, you'd stick your phone in the little ear thing and you do beep, 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 modem back in.
And not your cell phone.
Yeah, not your cell phone. Everything had wires. It was just, this is just, I'm dating myself now, by quite a bit. I was a, young guy back at the time. This was a very, very long time ago, before Apple Computer, before personal computers, before any of that. And my dad, again, being a high-tech entrepreneur, I went to him and I said, hey, Dad, what do you think? I've got this choice to be over here in Cupertino where all these companies are and all these employers and all these people who are going to purchase office products. Or the other choice I have is out here in this place, Milpitas, and it's a bunch of orchards. It's where the dumps are. I used to go ride my, dirt bike there. And he goes, well, what I'm doing right now is I'm a part of a big movement of startups, and we're all building out there. If I were you, I would go there because that's a path of progress. Well, that was the first time I'd ever heard the term path of progress. And so I made a strategic decision to invest my time and energy, because back then that's all I had, into this territory. And so I started going out there, and I'd find these little companies, these little companies that were starting up. I opened up Cypress Semiconductor when they had 8 employees.
Wow.
I opened up Daptech when they had 30 employees, and they grew to have, over 1,000, 1,100 employees. And so I was a superstar salesman, and it wasn't because I was a great salesman necessarily, but I was super strategic. And so I ended up riding this wave. And so I learned very early in life, way before I got involved in real estate, the importance of understanding where the path of progress was and learning how to look at those decisions through the eyes of the CEO. And that's really the point.
Well, it actually does speak to the whole startup thing, which is a lot of what's in this article and some more information we're going to share here, which is that in most countries, the majority of jobs are small businesses. And the idea that you're going to pick this territory where there's established businesses, imagine how many office supply salespeople were already knocking on those doors.
Well, that was the point too.
Right,
that's
exactly.
the other lesson I learned. My whole don't be Waldo. I learned if you go in the crowded door, and this is the thing, I taught for the California Association of Realtors in their GRI designation program, and I taught the finance module, and these real estate agents would come in and I would ask them, so what's your focus? What's your emphasis? I was looking to see who was interested in doing investment real estate. Very, very few of them. The vast majority were all going to start with first-time home buyers.
Yeah.
And their attitude was, I'm going to start with first-time home buyers because that's easy. And the problem is it's really not easy. And the reason it's not easy is because every rookie real estate agent out there is starting there. So you are competing.
And first-time home buyers take the absolute most amount of time in a transaction.
Yeah. And so I said, you guys, I challenged them. I said, why don't you think about going down the investment door? You get to work with a more affluent client. There's very few real estate agents who know how to do it. And I would open up the whole conversation. But anyway, it was a point of not being Waldo,
right,
to interject that.
Well, and I think that as we're looking today, we're seeing, and maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but we're seeing an increase in startups. In this time of our uncertain economic future, a lot of folks are starting companies. And we're going to talk about what that looks like and what it means to real estate investors.
Yeah, for sure. Because for the last 8 years, we've actually had a significant decline in startups. And all of a sudden, it's begun to spike back up. And I don't know what the reasons are. If I get a chance to talk to some of these young entrepreneurs and find out what they're thinking and why they're starting businesses, I would tend to think it's because they can't find jobs, right? And so you have to start your own business and create your own job. I also think that with technology and the ability to access resources, kind of what I call the Uberization, or the shared labor, the ability to just put a company together very quickly, I think that helps a lot too. So there's a lot of things positive and negative that are driving this startup growth. But one of the things that often happens when you go perusing the news is you get referred to resources you might not have otherwise known existed. And so in this particular article about Silicon Valley losing its status, actually it dropped from first to eighth in this ranking. My big question was, well, who put together the ranking? And the ranking was put together by the Kauffman Foundation out of Kansas City. And what they do is they are an entrepreneurial kind of brain center, and they study and support entrepreneurism. And they produce all of these reports, and it was pretty interesting.
The whole idea, as you're perusing the headlines, this is a great thing to learn about how to read the news. Most news is written by a journalist who makes $60,000 a year. And their job when they wake up in the morning is to figure out something new to put on the website that's going to attract eyeballs. So an organization like Kauffman puts this 70-plus page report together, and some journalist gets a hold of it and reads through it and then writes 500 words or 1,000 words trying to explain parts of it. And their whole article isn't even about it. It's just food for thought. Well, anytime we see a report referenced in an article, it is our practice to go find the report. Now, sometimes these reports cost money. Well, if you're really interested, spend the money. Or if you're in media, make a media request to get the report, right? So we get to see these things, and that's one of the ways we read below the headlines. So just a quick aside there.
Yeah, and that's important because, again, you're looking for clues. That's what this whole thing is about, clues in the news. And clues is just you find a lead and you chase it, and you sometimes it's a dead end and it doesn't go anywhere. And sometimes it takes you to something interesting. And in this case, it did. So Kauffman creates this index of startup activity, and they do it by the state level and they do it by the MSA, Metropolitan Statistical Area level. And because this particular article was referencing the MSA version, that's the one I downloaded. And what I found was number one was Austin.
Yeah, Austin, Texas. The MSA is Austin, Round Rock, San Marcos, as was number one last year. In fact, I guess it was the year before that Silicon Valley or San Jose, California, which is San Jose, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, that MSA was number one. But it's headed down, and Austin is strong.
Yeah, so it was Austin was number one, Miami was number two, Los Angeles was number three, and it had moved up one from last year. So I thought that was interesting. San Francisco was number four, and it had moved up 5 places. So I thought that was interesting. Las Vegas was number 5, and it had moved up 1. New York, this was really interesting, is number 6, and has moved up 4 places. And, New York is interesting. Now, I don't exactly know this particular area. I'm not sure because the ads I've seen about advertising in New York were advertising, I think, for upstate New York. And this says New York, New Jersey, Long Island. But I do know that New York has been offering tax abatement as a way to attract startups. And they've been doing that. They've been advertising on major media for a couple of years. I don't know if they're still doing it, but it wouldn't surprise me if tax policy, kind of starting with the theme of the show, had an impact on that. Houston is number 7. They came up from number 8 last year. And San Jose is now number 8 and it dropped 5 places. So anyway, we could go through the whole list. And what we're going to do is we're going to give you a link, or we're going to give you the ability to request this report. We'll tell you how to do that in just a minute. But one of the things that was interesting is, number one, obviously who's at the top of the list. And the other thing is who's moving in either direction. And there were some things that I thought were really interesting. Nashville, for example, moved up 7.5 points from 23rd to 16th.
Yeah.
And Nashville has been a place that's been on our radar. People have been coming to us. Hey, have you seen all the startup? There's a lot of activity, a lot of economic activity. We got a good friend who lives in Nashville, and he's got a little investor group there that we go visit from time to time. That's all said. Wow, that's interesting. Kansas City has moved up 11 places.
Orlando.
Yeah, Orlando moved up a bunch. So I thought that was interesting. Then on the other side of the coin is the people who had dropped. Seattle, Washington dropped 7 places. Isn't that interesting? Now, Seattle's been in the news recently, haven't they?
Oh, yeah.
What has Seattle done in the news, policy-wise, that you think may have had an impact on this?
Well, Seattle has a really high minimum wage.
Yeah, Seattle did something fairly controversial and instituted a increase in minimum wage. And the net result, according to the reports that have been coming out, is it's had a detrimental effect on job growth. If you're a startup company and you're trying to get started, you're trying to preserve every dollar. And, if you can go someplace and start your business someplace else where you can have lower labor costs, you're probably going to do that. I'm not saying that's what happened in Seattle. I don't know. This is part of where you look at the different pieces of the puzzle, but it wouldn't surprise me if that ended up being the case. There's another one here, the market I don't have that much familiarity with. Virginia Beach MSA dropped 14 points, and that was the biggest loser on this chart.
Yeah.
So, if we had the time, we could kind of delve in and we could go, okay, here's all the winners. Here's all the losers. Here's all the people that are moving up. And here's all the people that are moving down. Can we study some of those markets and find out what the winners have in common and what the losers have in common? And what could we learn about markets that we would want to move towards and markets that we might want to move away from? We don't have time to do that. But if you want to do that, what we've done is we've downloaded this report and we'll make it available to you. All you have to do is send an email to startup@realestateguysradio.com. That's startup@realestateguysradio.com, and you can download that report for free.
It's not the only thing to judge a market by, number of companies starting, but certainly as a landlord, I'm interested in jobs. I want to make sure my tenants have the ability to pay my rent. So this could give you some clues as it's a market you might want to consider, especially if you're new to real estate investing and you're like, I don't know where to invest. Well, take a look at the markets that are doing well. We're talking about clues in the news, things that the headlines are telling us and what we can do as real estate investors. More when we come back. Plus, we'll play real estate trivia next. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Real estate investment advice right in your mailbox. Sign up for the free Real Estate Guys newsletter at realestateguysradio.com.
Memphis, Tennessee is a market that delivers in more ways than one. As home to FedEx, Memphis is one of the largest distribution hubs in the world. That means working class jobs. No wonder Memphis is one of the best cash flow real estate markets in America. And the guy in Memphis who can deliver great, affordable cash flow turnkey properties is Terry Kerr at Mid-South Home Buyers. Contact Terry through the resource section at realestateguysradio.com. And be sure to order Terry's tips for turnkey rental property investing. It's free. Just send your request to turnkey@realestateguysradio.com. That's turnkey@realestateguysradio.com.
If you want to retire in the next 5 years or less through real estate, then please pay close attention. My name is Brad Sumrock, and I've taught thousands of my students how to replace their incomes, quit their jobs, and retire faster than they ever thought possible by not investing in single-family homes. You see, there's a secret to retiring fast with little risk, and it has nothing to do with being a landlord, fixing toilets, or flipping houses. The secret is multi-family apartment buildings. Starting from scratch with zero experience, I managed to pocket over $1 million in cash and retire from my 17-year corporate job within 3 years of apartment investing. Now, this is not your typical no money down real estate training. We believe in smart, hard work for intelligent people. So if you're good with your finances, have a decent job, or saving your money, and you're looking for a change and getting out of the rat race, then investing in apartment buildings might just be the answer you've been looking for. Send an email right now to sumrock@realestateguysradio.com to get the details of my upcoming training event, and you'll also receive my free training webinar, Apartment Investing for Beginners. That's Sumrock, SUMROK, @realestateguysradio.com.
Hi, this is Lawrence Yun, Chief Economist with National Association of Realtors, and you are listening to the Real Estate Guys.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program. Tell a friend about the Real Estate Guys. We appreciate you listening to us, and we're happy to celebrate our largest download month ever last month. Very excited about that, so keep spreading the word. We're talking about clues in the news. We like to look at the headlines and just think about how does that affect real estate investors. Not every headline affects real estate investors, but a lot of the economic stuff does. And this time of year, there's all kinds of news out there. So we're taking a look at the headlines. Before we get back to the headlines, it's time for you to win a prize on today's real estate trivia question. We are going to ask you a question that's something to do with real estate, and your mission is to figure it out. Send us the answer and your mailing address to trivia@realestateguysradio.com. The first person with the right answer is going to win a copy of Robert Kiyosaki's latest book, Second Chance. You're going to love this book. It can be yours if you know today's real estate trivia question. Last week on the Real Estate Guys, we were in beautiful Belize, and we asked this. Belize was granted independence on September 21st, 1981. After using the name Belize since June of 1973, what was the country previously known as? Well, Belize was British Honduras, which, by the way, was the last continental possession of the United Kingdom in the Americas. Here's our real estate trivia question for this week. Where in the world was the first escalator built? Yep, somewhere in the world there was the very first escalator, and it was pretty rough, but it worked, and it was a while back, and your mission is to figure out where. What area of real estate, in fact, what particular development housed the world's first escalator? If you know or just want to take a guess, send your best guess to trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Include your name, your physical mailing address, and the answer to the question. So if you're the winner, you'll get a copy of Second Chance by Robert Kiyosaki. That's today's real estate trivia question. We're looking at the headlines. It's clues in the news, and there's a lot going on out there.
There is. And really what we're now doing is we want to think about a little bit some of the factors that CEOs think about, right? Because I was very fortunate. My dad was a CEO. And so I would have these conversations with him early in my career. And I learned to kind of look at the world through his eyes, and I learned to think about what he thought about as he was making business decisions about who to hire, where to locate, when to expand, how things were affecting him. For example, I had decided that I wanted to be a history teacher and a football coach. And so I had already gotten married. I already had a child. My dad was taking his company public, and I wanted to go back to college and play college football and take this path because I felt like my dad was going to be a multimillionaire. I said, Dad, I don't want to have to work for money. I want to work for passion. I didn't understand you could put the two together back then. And so I said, I want to be a teacher and I want to coach young people. That's what I want to do. I said, would you help me? And he goes, sure. So he was going to send me off to college, and I started my first year in junior college, and I kept my job kind of part-time. I reorganized my life so that I could keep my job and play football and go to school and still be a father to my young daughter, right? So all this is going on in my life. Well, this was my first experience with a recession. Even though there had been a recession before when I started my career, I didn't know what a recession was. And so I didn't have any concept of recession. I just went out and worked and had some success. Well, now I had a base of business. And then when the recession came, my business went down. But the other thing that happened for my dad was he was getting ready to take his company public, and his biggest customer was Atari. And Atari was having all kinds of problems because of the recession. And so he had to withdraw his public offering, which meant that the millions that he thought he was going to have to send me off to college and support me and my family were going away. And so I realized that these big economic factors impacted the decisions that CEOs made in people's lives, like mine. And so I said, well, from now on going forward as a business person, and at that time, as I shared earlier, I had to look through where I was going to choose for territories, what business segments I was going to invest my time in developing in my clientele. I needed to think more like a CEO. I brought that same thought process when I became a real estate investor. I said, I've got to think about where CEOs are thinking. So when we started putting our field trips together, one of the things that we would always do is we would go to the Chamber of Commerce in the particular area, and we would use our positioning as a radio show to get an interview. So now we would get to sit down with the leader of the Chamber of Commerce.
And think about what a Chamber of Commerce does. They aren't there to promote real estate. They're there to promote a city, to say, hey, our city is a great place to come and start a business and to bring employment. And they have their finger on the pulse of what's happening in terms of companies and industries that are considering coming. They won't always tell you who those people are, but they know they're early in, and they've got great economic data and great information about jobs in their area.
Well, yeah. So, let's say, for example, you're a real estate investor out there and you're thinking about different markets. Maybe you see a report like this Kaufman report and you say, okay, I think I'm going to be interested in Austin. I think I'm going to be interested in this other market and this other market, right? And so you go in and you just maybe do some looking up and you look at 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes for the price, and you look at 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes for the rent. You do the math and you're like, okay, that's within spitting distance, or, whatever your product class is. I'm just using single family homes as an example. And so at a cursory look, you go, okay, it looks like the numbers kind of make sense from a distance. Well, let me kind of understand the trends going on. And so, you start Googling around. One of the places you want to go is to the Chambers of Commerce. And so if you request some of the Chamber of Commerce data and their pitches, what the things they're offering to CEOs who are making decisions, if you're thinking like a CEO, then you're like, okay, well, I want to understand what somebody would be thinking about. Why would they want to invest their company in the marketplace? I want to know, why would I want to invest my money in the marketplace? And then you compare market to market to market. And you say, well, if I was a CEO making a decision about where to relocate my business, where would I go? And the great news is a lot of this information is free.
That's a great analogy, great way to look at things. We talked a couple of weeks ago about running your real estate business like a business. And this is even a step further to say, if I was a CEO of a company, where would I go? I'd want to make sure there was good labor. I want to make sure there's good labor if I'm a landlord. What's the education level like? Quality of life in the area? What can they afford? All those things are important to me as a landlord as well.
Yeah. So going back to the Silicon Valley article that kind of kicked this thing off, San Jose just became the first city in the U.S. to have its median home price go over $1 million. Think about
crazy.
that. Think about if you're trying to recruit somebody from a different part of the world or right out of college to come to work, and this person is thinking, I'm going to go to Silicon Valley, beautiful place, I'm going to work for a high-tech company and make a couple $100,000 a year, and you go to buy a home and your mortgage payment is $10,000 a month.
Yeah.
Right? You'll say, well, wow, I'm not so rich as much as I thought, especially when you look at the tax rate in California. By the time you get done, you don't have that much left over and you're not quite as affluent as you thought you'd be.
Well, and having lived in California for many, many years, I'll tell you this, the median home in San Jose is no great home. It's not like, oh my gosh, it's a palace. The median home in San Jose is just kind of an average, 3 and 2 that's 45 years old and kind of falling down.
Yeah, and that's so true. So one of the other things you look at is a regulatory environment and taxes in particular. And so there was another big article that just came out that I think we'll close this episode talking about because there's some profound lessons on it. It is the European Union came out with a tax ruling and nailed Apple Computer for $14.5 billion they allege Apple owes in past taxes to Ireland.
That's going to start to add up. A few billion here, a few billion there. Before you know it, it's going to be tough.
Well, taxes come right off the bottom line. So think about all the people this impacts, right? You've got shareholders who own Apple stock, $14.5 billion right off the bottom line. You've got all of the people who work at Apple. You've got all of the companies who work for companies that support Apple, and on and on. So Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, wrote an open letter that was published in the news. I got this on Yahoo News in the finance. And he's just kind of recounted Apple Computer's history in Ireland. And he says, this is the direct quote from Tim Cook's letter. In October 1980, Apple opened a factory in Cork, Ireland with 60 employees. At the time, Cork was suffering from high unemployment and extremely low economic investment. But Apple's leaders saw a community rich with talent, like we were just talking about, and one they believed they could accommodate growth if the company was fortunate enough to succeed. He goes on to say, we have operated continuously in Cork ever since, even through periods of uncertainty about our own business, and today we employ nearly 6,000 people across Ireland. But even more important, he says, countless multinational companies have followed Apple by investing in Cork, and today the local economy is stronger than ever.
So he's making a pretty good case. Now, we saw this happen in Texas, right? Look at what happened at Cowboy Stadium. Cowboy Stadium used to be in Irving, and they were going to knock it down and rebuild it. And Irving didn't really come to the party. They weren't giving concessions. They thought, well, this is a shoo-in. The stadium's been here forever. And little Arlington said, wait, hey, what about us? And they assembled, and this was a wonderful real estate story, to assemble all this land in an area that wasn't the greatest area, and today is an amazing, thriving area with one of the most successful stadiums in the history of the world.
There's an old adage that capital will go where it's appreciated. And
Yes.
you should remember that. You have to think about the environments that places are creating. And this is really, you think about what is going on. Apple Computer is maybe still the largest company in the world by market cap. Apple Computer is the largest taxpayer in Ireland, in the United States, in the world.
Think about that for a minute. Here's the CEO of the company that pays more tax than any other company in the world, and based on regulatory environment, they might make a move that is going to put thousands of people out of work.
Yeah, now he's not threatening that.
No, he's not.
What he's doing is recounting all the good he did.
We're reading between the lines.
Well, think about it. I mean, if you've ever read the book Atlas Shrugged, you understand what's happening here. These governments, many of them have been completely mismanaged. They overspend, they're broke, and they're looking at anybody that has anything on their balance sheet to go take. And it's well known that Apple has a ton of money. So we can take $14.5 billion from Apple and it won't hurt Apple, but that is a slippery slope. But again, we don't want to wax political. We're just trying to see it through Tim Cook's eyes.
Yep.
So he goes on to say, Apple has helped create and sustain more than 1.5 million jobs across Europe. Jobs at Apple, jobs for hundreds of thousands of creative app developers who thrive on the App Store, and jobs with manufacturers and other suppliers. Countless small and medium-sized businesses depend on Apple. Well, this is a concept we talk about all the time. Apple is what we would call a primary driver.
Yep, they bring money into a marketplace. They're the primary horse, and they create primary jobs. But around that, in any market they're in, there's going to be secondary and tertiary jobs. Look at a dry cleaner. A dry cleaner only serves the local area, but they've got to clean clothes for people that go to work at companies like Apple. Now, not that Apple executives wear a lot of suits and ties, but you get the idea, right? It might be a coffee shop. It might be a bagel shop. These are businesses that aren't primary businesses. They are instead secondary or tertiary businesses that are catering to the people who have the primary jobs.
Yeah, so it would be naive for someone to say, oh, well, that doesn't matter to me. None of my tenants work at Apple. Well, no, they don't, but their customers might. The customers of their employers might. So you have to think about how important a primary driver is to an economy, and then you have to look at how they feel they're being treated. It doesn't matter how you feel about how they're being treated. It doesn't matter how Ireland or the U.S. government feel they're being treated. It matters how Tim Cook feels he's being treated. You don't have to agree with him, but you need to understand it, and you have to think about how he might behave in reaction to how he feels about how he's being treated.
We're talking about clues in the news today, what's happening in the news and what it means to you as a real estate investor. More when we come back. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Need help with your real estate investment portfolio? Check out the resources page at realestateguysradio.com.
Hi, this is Patrick Donahoe of Paradigm Life. Wall Street and banks spend billions of dollars per year in advertising with the goal to convince you that they are the solution. But take a look around. None of their advice has worked. The number one concern of all Americans is still money. So are you ready for another way? I've spent the last 10 years teaching people like you a superior way to build wealth and financial independence outside of Wall Street. I've developed a free e-learning program called Infinite 101 where you can learn about the perpetual wealth strategy. In this free program, you'll learn how to build your wealth without a 401k, IRA, or mutual funds. You'll also learn how to establish private financing without ever having to walk into a bank again. These are just two of the many ways this free program can propel you toward financial independence. Simply go to paradigmlife.net and click on the register button on the top right corner of the page to gain instant access.
Hi, this is Donald Trump, and you're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program. Getting ready to gear up for our 2017 Investor Summit at Sea, our 15th year. It's going to be amazing. Registration is just opening, so make sure you check out the website at realestateguysradio.com under Summit. We're talking about clues in the news, what's happening in the news and what it means to you. We're talking a bit about Apple Computer.
Yeah. The situation with Apple obviously is about a big company, a big employer. And over half of the people who work in the United States work for a big employer.
Yeah, and yet the vast majority of businesses, in fact, more than 89% of companies in the U.S., employ less than 20 people, according to the SBA.
That's right. And a lot of those little companies support big companies. So, to discount big companies, and I understand, we get upset about these multinational companies and, all that. And I understand the cronyism and the insider and the way the government, I understand all those things that people are concerned about when you think about big business and big government and big banks. I'm right there with you. And everybody says, well, the focus needs to be on small business. But the thing is, you can't abuse a big company and expect small business to thrive if they don't have a big company to sell to.
Well, absolutely you can. Look at exactly what Apple does. There's hundreds of thousands of app developers. Okay, those are small, sometimes one-man, two-man, three-man offices. That might be a gal who does that in part-time, but she's an app developer. If there's no app store, she has no job, she has no business. So Apple's the primary, the app developers are the secondary, and where she goes to get her clothes cleaned, that's tertiary. All those jobs rely on a company like Apple.
Well, and not so much that we're a big shill for Apple, but I got to tell you this, where would we be without iTunes?
Right.
We were just a local radio show, and then we had the big radio presence. But when we discovered podcasting and we were able to put our message out there to the world, you got to have good content, right? People have to respond to it. And you just mentioned we had our record download month. And, we have millions of downloads now. It's just crazy. And that largely happened because of Apple Computer and their innovation.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
And you have to think about that and the jobs that we create through the marketing and the things that we're able to do and the people, like in our syndication program, or the people are raising money and they're making investments and they're hiring people. It's a ripple effect. And so we just have to really think about this pool, this environment that we all swim in. And government policy affected. And it's not just the U.S. It isn't just the U.S. election that we're talking about. This is global. We talked about China earlier. Now we've been talking about Ireland. And I think let's close out on this one last thing, bring it back to real estate. So another Yahoo Finance article says U.S. new home sales climb at the highest pace in 9 years. And so the article says Americans stepped up their purchases of new homes in July to the fastest pace in nearly 9 years. The latest sign, they're drawing a conclusion here, that low mortgage rates and a solid job market are helping support the residential real estate market. Okay. Well, one thing you need to keep in mind when you read a headline like that is that new home sales are the vast minority of home sales.
Of course, most sales are resales, existing home stock, not new sales. And the reason that there might be new sales could have to do with jobs and mortgages. It also could have to do with incentives by builders and where builders are in their cycle and when those properties hit the market.
Or speculators. There was a lot of people back in the day, and I'm sure it's going on now because real estate is a hot commodity where people can jump in and buy those things and sit on them. And that's a different thing because if you look at markets with building rates and vacancy rates, and that's a report we don't have time to go into, but do some research on that yourself. But the point is existing home sales really is the larger indicator of what's going on in the housing market, and it's a lot less strong than the new home sales market, by the way. But the thing it says is low mortgage rates and a solid job market are helping support the real estate market, residential real estate market. I would agree with that. And of the two, which is more important, low mortgage rates or a solid job market?
I would guess that the most important thing is going to be jobs. That's where the money comes from.
Absolutely. History tells you that because, we've done the chart. So for decades, interest rates up, interest rates down. Real estate moves when people can afford to pay for it. And interest rates are interesting, but whatever they are in the environment, do lower interest rates make it more affordable? Yes, but it's really a job market. So, last year, as Mr. Trump was beginning to start his presidential campaign, we got a chance to interview him twice. And the second interview that we did, we asked him, Mr. Trump, we've had this big housing crisis and many people lost their homes. A lot of people blame it on government policy, Fed policy in particular. What's a healthy housing market look like in a Trump administration?
Right.
And his answer was simple and profound. Jobs.
Yep.
He goes, jobs. I'm going to be the greatest job creating president of all time. I don't know if that's true. And I don't know if he's the right guy. And I'm certainly not saying Mr. Trump is the guy that we need to elect. What I am saying, though, is I agree with the premise. If we're going to have a healthy real estate market, we have to have a healthy jobs market. And when I read articles like what's going on in Ireland with a company like Tim Cook, that makes me think a little bit about where the governments are at and the actions they may take in their desperation to get money, and how they might potentially abuse big companies like Apple, and how is a guy like Tim Cook going to react to that?
And really, that's the lesson today. When you read a headline, discipline yourself to take a look at it through the eyes of a real estate investor. The only thing in your life is not real estate investment, most likely. There's other things you're doing, and maybe you're one of those folks that works for a big company or owns a small company, and you read an article like that and think in terms of your business. Just step back for a minute and say, how's this going to affect my real estate holdings? If I'm looking to acquire more real estate, where am I going to look to find real estate? And maybe this clue into some of these startup markets is a place to start. So open your eyes, read the news, and there's great information out there if you take the time to think about it. Hey, thanks for tuning into the show today. Next week, we got a great show for you. Until then, go out and make some equity happen.
This episode of the Real Estate Guys radio show is brought to you by Paradigm Life. Powerful cash management strategies using life insurance. Learn more at beyourbank.com. Mid-South Home Buyers, low-cost, turnkey cash flow properties in Memphis, Tennessee. Corporate Direct, asset protection strategies for real estate investors from attorney and rich dad advisor Garrett Sutton. Find these and other great companies under the Resources tab at realestateguysradio.com. To learn how you can expose your product or service to the Real Estate Guys audience, call 888-489-7723 extension 4. That's 888-489-7723 extension 4. Or use the feedback page at realestateguysradio.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week right here on the Real Estate Guys Radio Show.